Ming City No. 5 Middle School Grade 3 Classroom. In between classes, many students who are tired of studying lie on the table and have a nap with their eyes closed. Wang Wei, do you know where Chu Yu went? A young girl walked to Wang Wei's seat at the table in front of Chu Yu, and woke him up softly with embarrassment. The girl is in a light blue school uniform, with a waist-length ponytail tied to her back, her eyes are clear, her skin is fair and tender, and she looks at him with a hint of apology in her eyes. Although it was only a 10-minute break between classes, Wang Wei was almost about to fall asleep with his exceptional sleeping skills. Was suddenly awakened. Although Wang Wei was not likely to have a seizure, the expression he raised his head must be unpleasant. But after seeing the girl, the displeasure on that face immediately melted like snow under the blazing sun. Qin Qunyu. Wang Wei's speech was a little choppy and nervous all of a sudden. After all, the opposite is the famous beauty in the third middle school row, and it is also the crush of many adolescent teenagers in the third middle school. Unfortunately, there is Wang Wei among many adolescents. You, what are you looking for Chu Yu for? It's the family information that the class teacher asked to hand in. The class has only Chu Yu's information left. The class teacher notified me before and asked me to rush to his office between classes, so I came to ask. Qin Qunyu said. Oh, this thing. Wang Wei smiled. That boy Chu Yu should go to the bathroom. You can look through his desk box. If he brings the information, it must be put in the desk box. This, isn't it? Qin Qunyu hesitated. What's wrong? Wang Wei waved his hand. That boy Chu Yu is not that kind of petty guy, don't worry. And the head teacher asked you to send the information to his office immediately. Class will be held after a few minutes delay. Look for it in his desk box first, and hand in some words before you talk. I'll talk to him when he comes. That's it. Qin Qunyu hesitated again, thought about it, and finally made up his mind. After all, the head teacher's tone was rather anxious. Chu Yu's desk box was full of messy textbooks. Qin Qunyu took them out one by one, carefully watching whether the materials she wanted to find were caught in it. Suddenly, Qin Qunyu pulled out a wad of paper from Chu Yu's desk box. What is this? Qin Qunyu's pupils shrank slightly. The texture of this stack of paper is different from ordinary paper. On each piece of paper, there are paintings. The painting on the top cover of is a scene of a man and a woman sitting in a pavilion to avoid the rain in the rain. The man seems to be a student, holding a drawing board in his hand and concentrate on drawing something. The woman seems to be a professional, drinking a can of beer, but staring at the teenager. Is just the cover of this stack of paper, which instantly caught Qin Qunyu's eyes. Because of the characters on the paper, the painting style is indeed very good, and the details are also in place. Above the cover, there is a short poem written in small print. Vaguely thundering, hazy sky, but I hope the wind and rain will come. Leave you here. Right below the cover, there are 4 characters. Garden of Words. Man. Comic. Qin Qunyu was a little surprised. To be honest, if 1 or 2 comic books were picked up from Chu Yu's desk box, she would not respond to novels or the like. But this stack of paper, Qin Qunyu can recognize, is the manuscript. Qin Qunyu flipped backwards. The teenagers and women I met on rainy days, the teenagers with shoes on the drawing board, and the women sitting in the lakeside pavilion drinking beer on rainy days. The woman who left after experiencing a brief contact, finally left only a short poem for the teenager. Thunder is faint, the sky is cloudy, but I hope the wind and rain will come and leave you here. The plot of seems to be a little plain, but for some reason, it has a faint appeal, attracting Qin Qunyu to read the draft. Suddenly, the drawing in her hand was snatched by one hand. Qin Qunyu was taken aback. A young man, I don't know when to come to her. What are you doing? Chu Yu frowned slightly, his expression a little unhappy. Qin Qunyu was a little nervous, and explained his behavior to Chu Yu. Family information. Chu Yu thought for a while. He had brought that thing to the school a long time ago, but he has never handed it in because of procrastination. Chu Yu looked for it in his desk box, and handed a piece of paper to Qin Qunyu. That's it. Oh, that's good. Qin Qunyu's expression was a little vacant, like a kid who was caught for doing bad things, afraid to look at Chu Yu's face. Also, if you look for information, don't do unnecessary things. Chu Yu is different from Wang Wei. As a straight man of two-dimensional steel, he doesn't have much interest in three-dimensional creatures, so he is not polite. Qin Qunyu suddenly puffed up her face, but it was true that she had made the mistake first. She ran through Chu Yu's desk box and read the cartoons in the desk box, so she couldn't say a word of rebuttal. In my heart, I can only silently scold Chu Yu's petty ghost. Oh, Chu Yu, why are you so excited? I told her to look through your desk box. It wasn't because of your absence and people busy submitting documents again. Wang Wei didn't notice that Qin Qunyu had been watching the cartoons in Chu Yu's desk box, but he was embarrassed when he looked at Chu Yu's expression a little serious. Looked at Wang Wei, Chu Yu sighed. Forget it, that's it this time. After all, I have been classmates with Wang Weijio in the first 2 years of high school, and the relationship is okay. This year, the two of them will be placed at the front and back tables of the same class at the beginning of the 3rd year of high school. Upon seeing this, Wang Wei looked at Chu Yu with satisfaction, and secretly said that Chu Yu was giving himself face. Oh! Qin Qunyu puffed up her mouth, responded with a grievance, turned around and left. The atmosphere was embarrassing, and she didn't want to stay any longer. I was a little excited just now, and my tone was a bit heavy, don't worry about it. Behind, Chu Yu's voice came. Just now, Chu Yu just drew the comics that he drew and was peaked privately, and he didn't control it. After he calmed down, he actually didn't think it was a big deal. After all, the materials had been dragged on until the end and he had forgotten about it. Responsibility. Chu Yu's words dissipated the grievances in Qin Qunyu's heart and the shame of peeking at Chu Yu's cartoons. Qin Qunyu turned his head slightly, only to see Chu Yu's profile face who was sorting the table box on the seat. Calm eyes, some delicate faces. The manuscript of the manga that Qin Qunyu read before has been taken back to the table by Chu Yu. Qin Qunyu wanted to ask Chu Yu if he drew the manga manuscript, but after thinking about it, he still didn't ask. After all, there is still a saying that I have privately turned over other people's desk boxes to find materials and handed in, but privately picked up other people's cartoon manuscripts and read it is indeed wrong, so I am not embarrassed to ask more. However, the episode of this small incident caused Qin Qunyu to have a profound influence on Chu Yu, a new classmate who had just been divided into classes in the 3rd year of high school, and the manga work that he had read only a small part of. Chu Yu sits heavily in his seat. The previous incident is just an episode. Took out the manga manuscript of the Garden of Words and looked at the characters on it. His thoughts returned to a month and a half ago. It was still summer vacation, and I was still asleep. The system is inexplicably possessed. Said what kind of cartoonist system it is, and it also brings many two-dimensional works on the Earth in parallel space. To be honest, it doesn't matter if Chu Yu has an additional system, just ignore it, but the many two-dimensional works on the Earth plane that come with this system make him tickled. You need to know that as a senior otaku, he has basically seen the slightly more interesting two-dimensional works on the plane of Dragon Kingdom by Yu Yu. Many times he admires the adorable newcomers who have just entered the house. At least they are faced with excellent works that can't be finished after several years. For someone like Chu Yu, it is hard to find an eye-catching work for several years. Therefore, the many excellent works attached to this system immediately ignited Chu Yu's enthusiasm. Although I have consciously learned how to draw comics for more than 10 years, I treat them as hobbies, and I have never thought of myself as a manga artist. But I was fooled by this system on the road of a cartoonist, coupled with the system binding rewards given by the system, manga specialization skills and this garden of words. It took Chuyu a month to draw the manuscripts of the 7-character manga of the Garden of Words and Leaves, and he submitted the manuscript to 3 manga magazines in Ming City 10 days ago. It was also summer vacation, and Chuyu had plenty of time to create, but the 7 chapters with a total of 170 and 80 pages of comics really made him tired. If it weren't for the system to give him a copy of the original comics for reference, plus the comics expertise the system gave him to optimize his drawing skills and drawing speed, otherwise, let alone 1 month, 3 months he can complete these 7 comics. Difficult. It's been 10 days since I submitted the manuscript. Chuyu's thoughts drifted to other places. It has been 10 days, and none of the 3 comics agencies have given him any news. There has been no news so far, it's not going to be out of play. Thinking of this, Chuyu feels a little heavy. After all, he got up early and greeted the dark and abandoned the work he painted for half a summer vacation. If no one recognizes that he can accept it, he will definitely lose it for a while. Although I think the work of Yan Ye Zhiting is very appetizing to him, it is useless if it is not to the appetite of the editor of the magazine. Chuyu's consciousness was immersed in the system space. Seeing a piece of the Earth plane works floating in the system space showing an unlocked state, Chuyu was really itchy. Because unlocking those works requires different values of world points. The only way to obtain world points, according to the system, is that Chuyu becomes a cartoonist and obtains it by spreading comic works on the plane of the Earth. The hotter the work, the more world points are obtained. Of course, this is ideal. Happening. The reality is that this system is a novice reward when the system is bound, and the free gift of the works the court of Yan Ye is facing an embarrassing situation where no one asks for 10 days of submission. In this regard, Chuyu is also very helpless. Forget it, if the editors of those 3 magazines don't like it, then they can publish it on the internet for free. Anyway, as long as the work is disseminated in this world, no matter what channel it is used, as long as someone reads it and thinks it is good looking from the heart, then there will be a world point in the money. That's far away. Sighed, Chuyu's consciousness was noisy by the class bell, and he withdrew from the system space. At this time, the phone in Chuyu's pocket suddenly vibrated. Chuyu picked up the phone and looked at it, his eyes condensed suddenly. A text message came from the phone. Hello, I am Sue Lu, the editor of Cuttlefish Comics. This magazine has the intention of cooperating with your submitted works. I now invite you to come to the magazine for an interview tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock in the morning. The location is. Although Chuyu wanted to keep her expressionless and cool, she finally pretended to say this is the expected result. But the unbearable smile on his face betrayed him. After all, the work he copied over a dozen days was recognized by some people, and he really couldn't keep a low profile. I waited for 10 days and finally waited. So a few seconds later, Chuyu found out that the whole class was staring at him intently. In front of Chuyu, a math teacher, an old man in his 50s, looked at him with a bad expression. Chuyu's smile solidified. 10 o'clock in the morning the next day. Chuyu alone came to the office of Cuttlefish Comics Club, located on the 18th floor of a building in the city center. After explaining his intention, under the leadership of the young lady at the front desk, Chuyu passed through the noisy office area and entered an office. The office area is not large, about 10 square meters, 1 office chair and 1 desk. Various materials and sketches were placed on the table in a mess. A woman with black-framed eyes lowered her head and looked at the sketches in front of her carefully. Her reading speed was slow at first, and then it got faster and faster, but after all, she roughly scanned the work. No, the level is too bad. The woman shook her head. Hello. Chuyu interrupted her at the right time. Because Chuyu saw that she was ready to reach out to the next work. This is too concentrated, I have been in for 2 minutes, haven't you noticed me yet? Wow. Sue Lu was a little startled. Raised his head, a white and delicate face faced Chu Yu, with doubts in his eyes. You are. I'll introduce myself first. Chu Yu doesn't hate people who are serious about this kind of work. Real name Chu Yu, pen name, Shui Xin. I received a text message from you yesterday. Are you, teacher Shui Xin? Sui Lu opened his eyes wide, and saw Chu Yu from his head to his feet, and from his feet to his head. You are a male. A touch of embarrassment appeared on Chu Yu's face. Do I look like a woman? Sorry, I didn't mean that, but I always thought that the teacher Shui Xin who drew the Garden of Words and Leaves was a girl. After all, it was a cartoon of this type, and the pen name was also. Sui Lu was also busy waving his hands. S pen name is also very feminine, right? Chu Yu knew what Sui Lu wanted to say. To be honest, it is reasonable for the other party to have this kind of thought. After all, in the Dragon Kingdom, most male cartoonists prefer to reason, suspense, and fight kingly comics, which are similar to youth comics like the Garden of Words. There are many women's cartoon homes. As for the pen name Shui Xin, it is a homophonic casual. After all, Chu Yu is a very entangled person in taking a pseudonym. After struggling for a long time, he chose this name casually. Oh, by the way, when I first met, I was Sui Lu, the editor of Cuttlefish Comics. Sui Lu realized that he had been around for a long time and had not introduced himself to Chu Yu. Please sit down. Sui Lu's face straightened, and he pointed to the chair next to him. After Chu Yu sat down. I won't talk nonsense anymore, and I will get to the topic immediately. Sui Lu looked at Chu Yu and said. Mr. Chu Yu, this manga agency received your submission of your work by Yan Ye's hiding 8 days ago, and the reviewer of this work is me. Sui Lu looked at Chu Yu, with language organized in his mind. To be honest, after reading this work, I personally think that this work is fully qualified to be serialized in the comic magazine Menying under our Cuttlefish Comics agency in terms of story, structure, and style. Chu Yu nodded repeatedly on the surface, but complained in his heart. Didn't you mean to enter the subject? Why are you talking about this? Didn't you ask me to sign the contract? Take out the contract. But. Sui Lu suddenly changed his tone. Chu Yu breathed slightly. Things have changed? After I put forward this opinion to the editor-in-chief at the serial meeting 3 days ago, it was rejected. Reject? Chu Yu frowned slightly. Why, the editor-in-chief thinks the Garden of Words is not good. It's not that I don't think it will work. Sui Lu said. It's too short. Can't? Is too short? For a while, Chu Yu's expression was a little unnatural. There are many periodicals under this manga agency, but the most famous is the manga periodical Menying. Menying Tianyan Comics under Tongfenjiao Comics, and Fire Dragon Comics under Lonja Comics are also known as the 3 major comic journals in Los Angeles. Its sales channels cover all major, medium, and small cities in the province, with sales of more than 300,000 yuan per period. The comics serialized on it are at least 20 chapters or more works. But Teacher Shuxin, your Garden of Words and Leaves, only has 7 words to end. And so. That's why Gui Manga felt that the Garden of Yan Ye as a short story was of low commercial value, so didn't you agree to its serialization? Chu Yu's frowned brow gradually stretched, and he sighed lightly. Sure enough, how can things go so smoothly? Chu Yu is not an unreasonable person. Although he thinks that the manga work of Yan Ye Zhiting is very good, he has nothing to say when the manga agency cheats his own work out of commercial considerations. Who calls him not this one? Where is the boss of the comic club? After figured it out, he could see. It's just a pity for this work. Then Miss Sui Lu, you asked me to come over today just to inform me in person that my work has been eliminated. You can just send a text message for this kind of thing, so that I don't have to skip class and come to this meeting. Chu Yu shook his head and said, "Take class." Sue Lu was taken aback. At Chu Yu's age, she could see that it was a student, but she didn't expect the other party to skip class. But Chu Yu just complained casually, and didn't mean to blame Sue Lu. After all, the other party had helped him win the opportunity, although he didn't succeed. In that case, let's stop there for today. Chu Yu didn't get muddled, and got up to leave. Wait a minute. I haven't finished speaking yet. Behind, Sol Lu's voice came out. Chu Yu turned around. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com looked at Sue Lu. Teacher Shui Xin, you are too impatient. Sue Lu looked helpless. Although the editor-in-chief disagrees with the serialization of Yan Ye Ting on the comic, but I still think this work is excellent. After discussing with the editor-in-chief, he agreed that this work can be serialized in another periodical Ink Shadow under our comics agency. Today I asked teacher Shuxin to come to discuss this matter with the teacher. The teacher's contribution to the Garden of Words and Leaves is serialized on the comic film, but if the teacher is willing, our comics club is willing to serialize the teacher's work on the ink film. I just don't know what you think, Mr. Shui Xin. Opposite Chu Yu, Sol Lu's expression is serious. Ink Shadow? Chu Yu thought for a while. This is another manga journal under the Cuttlefish Comics Club, which publishes some short comics, but the quality of the works published on it is basically average. Compared with the signature comics under the Kyo Comics Club, the ink film is undoubtedly much less influential. The sales volume of each journal is in the tens of thousands. But, do I have a choice? Chu Yu smiled bitterly. He now has basehand but no basehand key. One of the works in the comic system is in an ununlocked sleeping state, waiting for him to unlock the world points obtained through the circulation and popularity of the Garden of Words. Although the sales of ink and film are average, it is always better to serialize Yan Ye Ting than Chu Yu uploading his works to the internet for free to gain popularity. So Chu Yu returned to his seat in only 3 seconds. He looked at Sue Lu with a smile on his face. I think we can discuss the specific details of cooperation. Sue Lu looked at Chu Yu, a little startled. This young man is too bachelor, he just got up and left without any chance of cooperation. But when the opportunity for cooperation reappeared, the person who seemed a little indifferent before immediately smiled, looking at the opposite attitude. Sue Lu smiled, but felt that Chu Yu people had an appetite for her. After all, in the workplace, people in contact with you can't tell whether you are true or false. Like Chu Yu, he doesn't hide it. No, it should be someone who doesn't want to hide his thoughts at all. On the contrary, Sue Lu feels that getting along with him is much easier. The next thing is much simpler. Since the two of them have the intention to publish the work of Yan Ye Ting in the short comics periodical of Cuttlefish magazine, they mainly discuss the price and copyright of the comics. Although the number of words in the work of Yan Ye Ting is very low, the words in the 7 words are barely enough to make a single book. Although Sue Lu believes that the serialization of this work does not have a high probability of reaching a Singlaline version, it is better to write these things into the contract first, and disputes will arise later in the province. After nearly half an hour of discussion, in the end, the two people negotiated and the result was that Cuttlefish Comics was published on the ink film at a price of 220 yuan per page. If the work of Yan Ye Ting is published in a separate book, the royalty ratio will be 7%. In other words, for the Garden of Words with about 160 pages of 7 chapters, Chu Yu's final remuneration was about 35,000. As far as Chu Yu understands, this can be regarded as a normal rookie comic price, even slightly higher. It seems that Sue Lu didn't want to bully Chu Yu as a rookie, so he didn't understand the market and kept the price down. And there is an additional condition in the contract, that is, in the next year, if Chu Yu has a new comic, he can only choose to deliver it to the Cuttlefish Comics Club, even if the Cuttlefish Comics Club serialization meeting does not pass the new serialization of Chu Yu. In this case, you cannot submit your work to other comic journals. As compensation, the Cuttlefish Cartoon Society gave Chu Yu a certain economic subsidy to a certain extent. However, the level of subsidy is far inferior to the subsistence allowances in cities and towns. It is worse than nothing. Chu Yu looked at this additional condition, and was silent for a long time. This is a rule of the industry. Don't say that the 3 major comics clubs in the city have an influence only in one province, even if it is a large comics club with sales channels all over the country like the Magic City 7, newcomers want to serialize in the periodicals. You must accept similar additional conditions, which are not unique to our agency. Sue Lu explained to him that Chu Yu would think too much. After all, it is impossible for any comic company to cultivate a potential newcomer in its own periodicals, and then let them change jobs at will, waiting for the price. Although such terms are overbearing, they want to embark on the road of cartoonists, first. The step is to accept it. Accept it, and only after gaining fame are you eligible to negotiate terms with the capital. Chu Yu understands the truth. He just thought that this was the first contract he had signed in his life. After signing this contract, he would be half-footed into the society. While earning income according to the contract and treaty, it will also be bound by the treaty. For a while, I was a little scared and horrified, but more excited. Chu Yu picked up the pen with a cold touch. He took a deep breath, gritted his teeth, and without hesitation, signed his name on it. Sue Lu smiled at the corner of his mouth, stood up, and reached out to Chu Yu. Teacher Shuxin, I wish us a happy cooperation. Happy cooperation. Chu Yu also smiled and nodded, and shook hands with her. After the two exchanged greetings, Sue Lu sent Chu Yu out of the building from the 18th floor of the Cuttlefish Comics Club. Sue Lu, who returned to the office again, took out Chu Yu's original contribution by Yan Ye Ting. Looking at these beautiful cartoons, Sue Lu took a deep breath. To be honest, at the comic series conference, basically no one liked Chu Yu's work. One is that Chu Yu is not well known, and the reviewers are cautious. Second, the style of Chu Yu's work is specious. It is neither traditional school love nor adult workplace emotions. Teacher-student love can't be talked about. The male protagonist Chu Yu and the female protagonist Shui Ye only talk to each other in the final emotional explosion, and stop abruptly when the emotional brewing of the whole work reaches its climax. But it is true. The style of this work is exquisite, and the rhythm narrative is not procrastinated, and the plot is not bloody. Therefore, she tried her best to fight against the crowd. Although she could not win the serialization on the movie, she tried her best to help Chu Yu win the opportunity of serialization on the Ink movie. Because this work made Sue Lu feel a kind of spirituality, she was not sure whether this work could sell well, but she felt touched when she watched this work. For an editor who reads many manuscripts like her, it is rare for a work to give her such a feeling. So it is not so much that Sue Lu signed Chu Yu because of this work, it is better to say that Sue Lu is optimistic about Chu Yu's potential. High school students, and if only the first manga has this quality, even if this work fails to catch on. What about the next work? Chu Yu returned home and lay heavily on the bed. Although he didn't do much physical work, he was still a little tired. He added the number of the editor Sue Lu on the phone, and the Wixen Penguin naturally added a friend. At this time, Sue Lu Wixen sent a message. Everything went well at work, and the serialization was put on the agenda. Next week, a work in ink shadow will be finished. The editor-in-chief has agreed that The Garden of Words will be published next week to take the place of that work. The efficiency is so fast? Chu Yu was taken aback. But after thinking about it, the serials on the ink film are basically short comics, and most of them are newcomers and some talented cartoonists who will publish works on them. Can have a place to be published in the near future. This is also normal for Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. On the phone, there were several calls from the head teacher. Chu Yu thought for a while, and made up the reason for his illness and cold at will, and took leave by the way. If you don't go to class, Chu Yu is alone in the empty room. Chu Yu also got up and went to the living room's parents' spiritual position and gave them incense. Chu Yu sighed, maybe it was because of his parents' early death that no one restrained him, so he would have no fear of skipping class and then asking for leave. It's also because you live alone that you are addicted to anime, two-dimensional things. Finally got the cartoonist system and became a cartoonist. Chuyu looked at the portrait of his parents, and suddenly said after a moment of silence. Mom and Dad, if people really have something like a soul, don't worry about me. Your son, although I used to play games and watch anime all day long, I am now a manga artist and earn 30,000 yuan. 5,000 yuan, at last half a social person. With my grades, it's best to go to college. If I don't go to college, I will become a cartoonist. I will never die if I want to come. Well, that's it. After a few words, Chu Yu seemed to be in a much better mood, and opened the curtains to let the sun shine in. In the beginning, after getting this system, Chu Yu just wanted to see more excellent comics from different dimensions. That's why I was fooled by the system to draw comics. But now, the wind was blowing gently, and Chu Yu took a deep breath. Although it is mainly copying, it can not only make money, but also read many excellent works from parallel worlds. Thinking about it, being a cartoonist and taking it as a career seems pretty good. At night, in a pub. Yes, Father, everything goes well for me here. I understand that my qualifications are too low, and it is difficult to convince the public to enter the group as a responsible editor, so I don't agree to come to this kind of small comic company to hone myself and improve my resume. I have been working in this company for half a year, and I have 3 comics in my hand. The popularity surveys on the comics under the Cuttlefish Comics Club are all in the top 10. I think this is enough to prove my ability. Will you stay for another year? No, Father, I want to return to the magic capital, Deep toot. Song Jiao looked a little ugly after hearing the voice on the phone after hanging up. Editor-in-Chief Song, why is your face so ugly? Song Jiao's colleagues looked at him and asked diligently. Nothing. Song Jiao took a deep breath, her complexion returned to normal. In the tavern, there is a staggered look. Speaking of which, I heard that Editor-in-Chief Pang agreed to solo serialization of a newcomer's work on Ink Shadow. Yes, it seems that at the last serialization meeting, because editor Song did not agree that the work was serialized on the comics, Sue Lu actually blatantly contradicted the editor Song at the serialization meeting. I didn't expect Sue Lu to transfer it. It's serialized on Ink Shadow. Speaking of which, since the voice of the tree in charge of Sue Lu ended, almost all the serializations of her works proposed by her in the 2 months have been rejected. The person who spoke said, while looking at him. Look at Song Jiao. Even if the serialization decision is passed, it will only be serialized in some insignificant journals. In the comics of the Teizua periodical of our comics club, there is no work edited by Sue Lu now. Sue Lu. A figure emerged in Song Jiao's mind. Suddenly, a trace of anger rose in his heart. Everyone present knows that the cold treatment Sue Lu received in the editorial department during this period was basically all signaled by Song Jiao. This young man who was personally appointed by the chairman of the Ink Film and Comics Club 6 months ago to be an associate editor in the editorial department. The first thing he did when he took office was to pursue the beauty of the Cuttlefish Comics Club, Sue Lu. However, it is obvious that Sue Lu does not have a cold with Song Jiao, and Song Jiao is still unwilling to give up after many times of different words. Finally, one morning 3 months ago, Sue Lu, who was harassed by Song Jiao again, broke out completely. Not only uttered some radical words, but most importantly, there were still many people watching. Song Jiao was ashamed of a sudden. Before this, Song Jiao's behavior was just a little too insistent in the eyes of people around him, it was not a big deal. As soon as Suelu broke out, the opinion of Song Jieu in the comics became that others didn't want him to be stalked. Since then, the serialization plan proposed by Suelu has always been rejected. Even if it is not rejected, serialization is only allowed in some weekly influential journals. Gradually, some comic creations that have a good relationship with Suelu are allowed. The author also transferred to other editors. Although there is no direct evidence that Song Jieu signaled it, everyone knows it well without telling it. In the long run, Suelu's comic editing career is estimated to have come to an end. Although I feel a pity for Suelu, the workplace is like this. No one dared to speak for Suelu for so long. There is a female editor who used to have a good relationship with Suelu. She looked at Song Jieu, who was surrounded by the crowd, and sighed lightly. As an outsider of the Cuttlefish Manga Club, Chu Yu naturally did not know the situation of his editor Suelu in the Cuttlefish Manga Club. Early in the morning, he got up to wash his face and brush his teeth, and soon went to school. Today is Monday, and it has been more than a week since the signing of the contract with Cuttlefish Comics. According to the recent chat with Suelu, on Wednesday, the new issue of Ink Shadow, Chu Yu's work said Yes Hiding will officially start serialization. As for the remuneration for the first episode, because it was the first episode, there were more than 40 pages of content, so a total of more than 9,000 yuan was hit into Chu Yu's bank account yesterday. This made Chu Yu excited all day yesterday. After all, Chu Yu's parents died early. Although there was no mortgage left in the house before his death, naturally, there was not much inherited cash left. If it was only Chu Yu's high school period, it would be enough to save a little bit, but if you want to go to university, I'm afraid you can only apply for student loans, and you have to work to earn living expenses in your spare time. So Chu Yu's life has always been pretty tight. 9,000 yuan is not much for an average family, but Chu Yu's total expenses have not been spent for most of the past 6 months. So after the money arrived, he immediately replaced the computer in his home that took 3 minutes to turn on, and it cost more than 5,000 yuan. Anyway, he now counts thousands of weekly manuscripts salary and a monthly income of almost 20,000. It is also generous to spend money, although the content of Yan Ye Jiting is enough for him to serialize for less than 2 months. By the way, I played games in the middle of the night with my new computer yesterday, which made my complexion look a little pale today, and the 2 dark circles in the eye sockets still look quite obvious. Monday morning, the usual flag-raising ceremony. More than 3,000 people in the school lined up neatly, waiting for the ceremony to begin. Wow, look at her! It's so beautiful, if my girlfriend is as beautiful as her in the future. Stop dreaming, you! Listening to the remarks from a few male classmates in the same class behind him, Chu Yu shook his head. Needless to say, he also knew who those people were discussing. Chu Yu cast his eyes to the girl who was less than 3 meters away from him. She was standing in front of Chu Yu, wearing a blue school uniform, but she was very beautiful when she wore it. Her straight and standard military posture, only her back, attracted the attention of most of the boys in the nearby queue. Zhao Kainyin, the class leader of the 6th class of high school, and the president of the 5th middle school student union, has been ranked first since entering the school. He is beautiful and indifferent. One of the 2 dream lovers of the school group of adolescent animals. Of course, the other person is naturally the monitor of Chu Yu's class, Qin Qunyu. Because of the flag-raising ceremony, Zhao Kainyin, the president of the student union, had to stand in front of the phalanx. Therefore, during the flag-raising ceremony on Monday and the flag-lowering ceremony on Friday, Chu Yu always heard similar comments from the surrounding boys. No matter how beautiful it is only a 3-dimensional mortal, is it necessary? There is no such thing as a wife who will never grow old or die, who will always be gentle and lovely to you. Chu Yu shook his head. Soon, familiar music played. But not long after the music played, there was a thumping sound beside Chu Yu. Dozens of pairs of eyes all around looked at the place where the sound was coming from. There, a weak figure fell to the ground, and a fair and beautiful face appeared. Her lips were a little pale, and a thin man appeared on her forehead. She wanted to stand up again, but after struggling for a long time, her legs seemed weak, and she couldn't stand up. The people around who saw this scene were full of question marks. Zhao Kainyin, what happened to her? On weekdays, she is very cold, and she refuses to be thousands of miles away. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com is not good at talking, and it is said that sometimes she doesn't say a word all day in the class. Has anyone ever seen her fall on the ground like this? Someone wanted to step forward to help her up, but now it is the flag-raising ceremony. The chaos may deduct points from the class. They also think of rumors about her indifference. On the contrary, she did not act alone and just watched her fall. On the ground, I struggled for a long time without standing up. No way. Chu Yu looked at Zhao Kainyin's pale expression. I looked around again and it seemed that no one wanted to go up and help. Although I didn't want to be nosy, he still gritted his teeth and walked to the side of Zhao Kainyin and squatted down and asked in a low voice. You, is this low blood sugar? Zhao Kainyin raised his head, looked at Chu Yu, and only a few seconds later gave a weak response. Okay. Can't you stand up? Chu Yu took a deep breath. Hey, come here and help her to the infirmary with me. Chu Yu looked at the nearest boy and said. What? Because of the amplified music of the flag-raising ceremony, the boy couldn't hear what Yu was talking about, and looked at Chu Yu with a look of confusion. Oh, forget it, forget it. Chu Yu didn't waste time with him. Looked at Zhao Kainyin, took a deep breath, put his hand under Zhao Kainyin's arm and bent his leg around. I'm sorry. Chu Yu looked at Zhao Kainyin. Zhao Kainyin seemed to realize what Chu Yu was going to do, and subconsciously raised his arm, wanting to refuse. But when she saw Chu Yu's eyes, there were no extra thoughts mixed up, and it seemed that she didn't mean to take advantage of her. She hesitated for a while, and stopped. Chu Yu saw this, and as soon as he put his hands hard, he hugged Zhao Kainyin and ran towards the infirmary. At this time, the flag was raised halfway, and all the students in the school only saw a boy holding the president of the student union of his school and running past everyone. The flag raiser's eyes were dumbfounded, and his hands were subconsciously slowed down by 2 beats. After the song was finished, the flag was only half raised. Zhao Kainyin's body is very soft. Although he is 1.6 meters tall, he weighs only 90 jins at most. But even so, when Chu Yu ran to report her to the infirmary on the 3rd floor, sweat still broke out on his forehead. What's wrong with her, classmate? Upon seeing this, a female doctor hurriedly let Zhao Kainyin enter a room and lay on the bed, looked at Chu Yu and asked. 20 minutes later, the pale Zhao Kainyin finally recovered. Although she hadn't been able to stand up yet, she had already gotten up and sat on the side of the bed. Hypoglycemia means that the body lacks energy for a while. Although people will be weak during the attack, they can basically recover quickly after supplementing energy. The doctor in the infirmary left the ward after Zhao Kainyin recovered. You didn't have breakfast in the morning. Chu Yu saw that she was basically recovering, and shook her head. Chu Yu knew that this disease was also caused by Chu Yu's mother. She always wanted to lose weight, and she ate a small amount of food, and she often fell home because of exhaustion. Every time a similar situation happened, Chu Yu and her father would always scold her. After Chu Yu spoke, she wanted to start a long talk like before. But on another thought, my mother is no longer there, and the other party and I are just strangers who don't know each other, and the words are still blocked in the end. In the future, pay more attention. After finishing speaking, Chu Yu got up, ready to leave. Wait a minute. Zhao Kainyin's weak voice came out behind him. Chu Yu turned around and looked at her suspiciously. You, what's your name? Zhao Kainyan looked at Chu Yu with clear pupils. Chu Yu. Chu Yu hesitated. Isn't it because I picked her up privately to find me trouble? Chu Yu. Zhao Kainyan nodded. Thank you, in the future. If I have the opportunity, I will pay you back this favor. Favorites? Isn't it to blame me for holding her privately? How does it feel? It doesn't seem like the rumored inaccessibility. Oh. Chu Yu looked at her seriously and nodded. He was not hypocritical. Say it if you have a chance. When Chu Yu walked into the classroom, all the classmates looked at him. Where did he carry Zhao Kainyan? What happened to Zhao Kainyan? What is his relationship with Zhao Kainyan? Why is Zhao Kainyan held by him and doesn't resist at all? One of human instincts is love gossip. But now is the time for class. The old math teacher has a bad temper, and no one dares to ask. Qin Qunyu has been paying attention to him since the comic incident in Chu Yu's desk box. After all, he was reprimanded by Chu Yu. A woman always remembers these things clearly. He and Zhao Kainyan, what's the matter? Chu Yu returned to his seat. Although Wang Wei at the front table was not good at asking during class, his expression told Chu Yu. After class, your kid will explain to me honestly, what is the relationship between you and Zhao Kainyan. But after class was over, after Chu Yu told the truth, the crowd dispersed in a rush, which was of no value in gossip. What happened on Monday was just an episode for Chu Yu. He and Zhao Kainyan, a scumbag, a tyrant, a person who is destined to be admitted to a prestigious university and become the top group of people in the social pyramid, and Chu Yu, a person who may not be admitted to university and graduated from high school, has not many intersections. Although Zhao Kainyan said that he would repay the favor of others if he had a chance, even if he listened to this, Chu Yu didn't take it seriously. 2 days are fleeting, and Wednesday is coming. The weekly magazine of Cuttlefish Comics, which was printed from the printing plant, had been shipped to major bookstores and newsstands in Los Angeles as early as yesterday. Although Ink Shadow is just a comic weekly with a weekly sales volume of only more than 60,000 copies, its sales channels are still spread throughout the province because it is backed by one of the 3 major comic companies in Los Angeles. This is why Cuttlefish Comics is recognized as one of the 3 major reasons that attract countless comic creators in Los Angeles to contribute. On the early morning of Wednesday morning, the major books and magazines opened. First of all, the most popular newspapers were the newspapers. As for comic journals such as Ink and Film, they are generally well known, and their audiences are students, and it is not over yet. At noon and afternoon, young people flooded into the bookstore, and there were many fans of two-dimensional works. Ren Yu is an ordinary office worker. He has a hobby that is unknown to his friends around him, comics. A large part of his monthly salary will buy the works of major comic journals, such as the top comic journals of the Dragon Kingdom under the Magic Capital 7, and the journals of the 3 major comic companies in Los Angeles. Of course, occasionally, he also buys ordinary manga periodicals like Ink Shadow. Different from the works in top journals, the serialization time is several years at every turn. In journals like Ink Shadow, these works are shorter and often end serialization in a few months. Sometimes I have different feelings when I read them. Not tired. Well, let me see, is Tian Luck also finished this week? Oh, a new serial. Garden of Words. The name is so unconscious. But, tut, the style is okay. The author is Shui Xin, it seems that he is also a romantic comic, a female cartoonist? Is it a newcomer? Ren Yu walked on the road and flipped through this comic journal. Lu Ji returned to the classroom after lunch and felt bored. After thinking about it, he went to the bookstore outside the school and bought a comic journal, an ink film. She did not continuously buy the previous periodical, so many of the works on it are more than half of the story progress. She flipped through the manga catalog and found what she wanted. The Garden of Words, the first chapter. Turn the book to the number of pages published in the Garden of Words. Into the eyes, a pavilion in the rain, a beautiful woman sitting alone. The 4 characters are lower than the comic page, the Garden of Words. To be honest, the name does not make people want to read it at all, but this painting is not on the same level as the serialized works that Lu Ji saw before. Must be delicate, more exquisite. Anyway, at least this style of painting gave her the desire to read. The rainy weather, the people who go to school and work, people are indifferent and just focus on their own affairs. Chu Yu, the protagonist who skipped class, came to the pavilion of the park with an umbrella. Yu reading www.yukansha.com. Inside, there has long been a woman sheltering here. A teenager who took out a drawing board and designed shoes, and a working woman drinking beer in a park pavilion on a rainy day. When they met for the first time, the two barely said a few words. Only after seeing the woman in Chu Yu's school uniform, she said a short poem inexplicably before leaving. Thunder is faint, the sky is cloudy, but I hope the wind and rain will come and leave you here. The second time I met, it was rainy. The two didn't seem to be surprised by the existence of each other. Compared with the first time they met, they were a bit less rusty, and it became natural to greet each other. Women with chocolate and wine, Chu Yu who looks at women's feet when designing shoes. Finally, Chu Yu told the woman that her truancy was limited to rainy mornings. The woman said, "If this is the case, maybe I will see you again." On the next page, the rainy season has arrived. Ends the content of the first episode. Meng Ming turned the comic to the next page, and the picture turned into another work. After reading a few pages, Meng Ming always felt that something was wrong. He turned the manga journal to the Garden of Words again. To be honest, the style of painting is very good, but the story is very plain and soothing. For some reason, there is always a feeling of being hung up slightly. The desire to read is not very strong, but there is indeed. Forget it, please support me, I hope the author will work harder, more. Smiled, Meng Ming picked up the phone, scanned the QR code on the back of the journal, the phone page jumped to a voting page. Voted for the works serialized in the ink film journals that he supports. Didn't think too much, after choosing the Garden of Words, I exited the page. Chuyu, as one of the authors who serialized the periodical on Man Ying, also bought a copy of this issue of Man Ying to support him. As the author, he understands that the work of Yan Ye Zhiting is indeed too short, and the plot conflict is not very strong. As a rookie cartoonist, the first serialization of such a work is not very suitable. It is precisely because of this that Chu Yu spends his energy on the style of painting, and strives to attract people's desire to watch through the style of painting in the early stage. Although the original work was obtained from the system, Chu Yu is not completely unaware of the situation of such works in the original dimension. Although the system prohibits Chu Yu from reading comics that have not been unlocked, at least the popularity, status, authorship, and other information of these works in the original world are not concealed. Chu Yu can obtain these materials in the system space. The original work was originally created by a well-known animation director on the Earth plane, and was created by Makoto Shinkai, known as the Wallpaper Madness. Compared with the popularity of the follow-up hits after Your Name was released, the performance of the Garden of Words is undoubtedly shabby. Many can only be called okay. This is still the result of the original work when the director has a certain reputation and funds for publicity. In this world, the author has become a newcomer like Chu Yu, and the serialized periodical is an ordinary periodical with only tens of thousands of copies sold. Chu Yu has no idea what achievements this work can achieve. Chu Yu's expectation for the Garden of Words is that it will harvest as many readers as possible, so that they can really like this work, gain more world points, and then exchange for the second comic work in the system. Cuttlefish Comics headquarters, Sua Lu sat in the office alone after handling the sundries in his hands. It was already afternoon, but she still did not leave the office because she was waiting. Today is the day when the first episode of the Garden of Words is published. In a manga agency, judging whether a work is good or bad, the editor does not count, the editor does not count, the reader does not count. Every time a comic periodical is published, the comic agency will collect questionnaires sent by readers to find out which works in a periodical are liked by readers. Of course, in today's society, such questionnaires don't have to be so troublesome by mail anymore, and you can vote directly on the internet. Although there is a certain lag in the dissemination of journals, the online voting 12 hours after each issue of journals is basically in line with readers' support under real conditions. What? Are you still off work? A man walked into Solu's office without knocking. Song Jieu smiled and was not polite, and sat down. Lu, it happens to be this, how about going to have a meal together? I'm sorry, Song, associate editor, I'm losing weight and don't eat dinner. Solu's eyes flashed with disgust, but he managed to resist the attack. But that adverb makes Song Jieu a little unhappy. Are you waiting for the voting support of this issue of Ink Shadow? Song Jieu smiled. He was not surprised by Solu's remarks. After all, in the past 6 months, he has failed dozens of times in inviting Lu to dinner. Otherwise, he would not use his power to embarrass Lu everywhere at work. According to common sense, most people give up long ago at this time, but Song Jieu is not that kind of person. He is that kind of typical villain, even he sees himself in this way. What's wrong with being a villain? It's much more comfortable than being a gentleman. A gentleman is not overwhelming. He will give up cleanly after pursuing girls and be friends in the future. But Song Jieu is not, he just ruined you if he didn't get it, and the kind of person who disgusted you. Since Lu doesn't do things well under his hands, then he must make Sol lose everything embarrassing. I said, that work is hopeless. You have to waste an ink film serialization quota for it. You will know when the results come out and the survey results come out. Don't be included in the 18 serial works on ink film. Popularity is at the bottom of the bottom. At that time, I cut a comic that ended in just 7 chapters. I really can't imagine, it's a joke in the industry. The colleagues will laugh at us when they learn about this kind of news, and the editorial department will also re-examine it. Your vision as a comic editor. After all, it has been a few months, and the serialization proposal of your new work has basically not been recognized. Even if there are a few works serialized in the second-line magazine of our company, the popularity is very average. Deputy Editor Song, are you finished? If there is nothing wrong, please let me be alone. Lu looked unmoved. Song Jieu was taken aback, then smiled, without much words, and left Solu's office. But at the moment when he closed the door, Song Jieu looked gloomy. Toast and not eat fine wine. Time, 1 minute and 1 second pass. At 7 o'clock in the evening, the support rate for the works of the comic periodical Ink Film was calculated, and the results were sent to the major editor mailboxes of the Cuttlefish Comics Club by the relevant staff. Lu opened the mailbox for the first time. The first place, The Demon Monk, got 1,263 votes. Lu bit her lip. Although she knew the odds were slim, she didn't think about it. She kept watching. Second place, Black Cat, got 1,005 votes. Lu looked down again, and there was brilliance in his eyes. The third place, The Court of Words, 998 votes. Hey, Lu breathed a sigh of relief. To be honest, as long as it doesn't start to be the bottom of the popularity and is not cut in the middle, Lu believes that by the day when the Garden of Words is over, everyone's evaluation is absolutely not bad. Fortunately, it seems that this year's audience seems to have a good sense of such a small fresh cartoon. Otherwise, if you really want to vote at the bottom, the situation will be as Song Jieu said. The editorial department, headed by Song Jieu, will attack him. After all, the process is not important. Song Jieu will use the actual facts he created to hold her accountable. When that day comes, I either succumb to him, or I can only resign from the comics agency where I have worked for several years. Song Jieu, who was driving a sports car and was going to pick up his girlfriend, also scanned the popular vote of ink film works in this issue. Seeing that The Garden of Words and Leaves reached the third position with the number of votes based on only the first words, his eyes stared for a few seconds. But then, he smiled. It's just a comic journal of the ink and shadow level. So Lu, if you are still like this, don't blame me. After all, before, I still had some leeway. But who is this person named Shui Xin? At this critical time, he actually went to join Solu's banner. Originally, Song Jieu had either threatened or lured, and had already forced Solu's powerful cartoonist to other editors. For 3 full months, the creators of 5 comics in the 8 serial works that Su Lu was in charge of before requested to change the editor because Su Lu failed to perform his duties as an editor. The remaining 3 works are all trivial small serials, plus 3 consecutive months. Solu's new serialization proposal was rejected. I thought he had driven Su Lu to a desperate situation. I didn't expect Su Lu to discover a good work. You know, when Su Lu proposed at the serialization meeting that he wanted to try to serialize Yan Yeting on the comics, he strongly opposed it, and publicly commented that the level of the work was too low, and the primary school students did not bother to read the words, although I think that even if he doesn't say this, other editors will stand up against it. After all, Menying is the top journal under Cuttlefish. It would be too trifling for a newcomer to upload it casually, but in fact it was he who acted as this villain. If Yan Yeting really gets the top vote on Ink Shadow, no matter what, he will still be a little bit embarrassed. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. Ahi. At home, Chu Yu watching TV sneezed violently. Who is thinking of me? Chu Yu didn't even know that he was sitting at home, and the pot came from the sky. At the beginning, he randomly selected Solu's information from the editor's contact address given on the official website of Cuttlefish Comics and mailed his own work. Song Jieu was labeled as a cartoonist of Solu's faction and was hated by people. Ding dang dang dang. The phone rang. Chu Yu took a look. A call from Su Lu. Hey, Boss Su, what's the matter? I have told you many times, call me Sister Su, Su Mimi will do. Boss Su, what is that? Oh, understand, Boss Su, what are you looking for me? It's no big deal. Isn't today the release date of the Ink Shadow Journal? The first episode of The Garden of Yan Ye is officially published on it. To be honest, judging from the internet voting situation of the Court of Words so far, it can be considered that the painting has achieved good results. Old rules in the industry, as an editor, I have to have a dinner party, but I don't know if you have time. Invite to eat. Chu Yu thought for a while. Is okay. He just hadn't eaten yet, so he was naturally happy to have someone treat him. Then where are you? Chu Yu asked. Your home is downstairs. Downstairs? Chu Yu ran to the window and probed out. Downstairs, Solu's car was temporarily parked on the side of the street, speaking with a mobile phone in one hand, and waving at him with the other. Don't look, come down, this lady didn't eat lunch for lunch, now she's starving to death. Zi. The contact between the meat and the grill iron net made a sizzle. The meat is fragrant. Chu Yu looked at the nearly 20 dishes of meat in front of him, and the basket of cold beer placed beside them. He was a little dumbfounded. Chu Yu never thought that Su Lu said that he would come to such a place for a dinner. The decoration of this store still feels a bit luxurious, and the price is estimated to be not cheap, but it is completely different from the scene of Solu's dinner in Chu Yu's imagination. Boss Su, I'm still a student, do you think these are appropriate? Chu Yu looked at the 2 opened beer bottles in front of him. Are you 18? Su Lu stared straight at the unbaked beef, and said calmly. Full, but I'm still a student. Chu Yu's words were interrupted by Su. That's fine, you drink the 2 bottles in front of you, and the rest is mine. While talking, Su put the remaining beer on the table from the next box, and by the way, opened the lid of each bottle. But this pile is mine, and the 2 bottles are yours. Tonight, if we don't finish the wine and eat the meat, we will not leave. Today's Su is different from her wearing professional attire in the company that day. Her dark hair is tied behind her back with a black headband, and a beautiful face is fully revealed. With thin eyebrows, crescent-like eyes, dimples appearing next to her face when she laughs, and a light green floral dress, she looks like she is in such a barefaced appearance and dressed in everyday clothes. She looked like an 18-year-old girl of the same age as Chu Yu. Many of the guests who passed by Chu Yu's table turned their heads, looked at the 2 of them, and muttered 2 words of premature love at the end. Chu Yu sighed, and she didn't know what she was smoking today. It was enough to invite herself to eat, but she still drank. There were more than 20 plates of various meats on the table, a dozen bottles of beer, and she didn't know when to eat. The first time I drank alcohol in my life was on the day my parents were buried. I bought a lot of wine by myself and wanted to drink him all night, but I didn't want to drink 2 bottles of wine, so I lay down until the next afternoon. I never thought that the second time in my life would drink alcohol with my comic editor. Looking at Su at the opposite table again, it was like a starving ghost reborn. The meat was picked up by her just after the meat was cooked. Chu Yu didn't eat much, but became a tool man who helped her turn the barbecue all the way. You are like this, aren't you afraid of gaining weight? Chu Yu looked at it for a long time, and couldn't hold back curiosity. After all, a beauty like Su has a good body and a face without makeup that is no worse than that of a star in the movie. According to reason, shouldn't such a person be calculated in grams per meal? Barbecue, beer, let go, how can you maintain your figure? Humph! Su looked at Chu Yu, full of triumph in it. You don't know this. I was born with a physique that is not fat enough to eat. When I am in a bad mood, I often overeating as I do now. What I like most on weekdays is that I hate the group of employees in the company, but they are eating their favorite food in front of female colleagues who are on a diet. Okay, I'm not interested in listening to your bad taste. Chu Yu stopped Solu's preparation of the long talk, but at the same time he also captured the key points in Solu's words. But when you say you are not happy, you will overeating like you do now. You mean, you are now in a unhappy state. Is anyone irritating you? Chu Yu thought for a while and asked. Chu Yu said in a word, Su who was originally indifferent, suddenly looked stiff, subconsciously thought of someone, and his eyes were full of disgust. The air became silent, and the atmosphere seemed a bit awkward. Snapped. Su who was on the opposite side, became more and more angry, and finally hit Chu Yu's forehead with a hand knife. What are you doing? Chu Yu was in pain and covered his forehead. Today is a celebration party to celebrate the number of votes for your work in the first issue of Serialization, and it is in the top 3 of the ink film. Why do you always mention some people you hate? Su said. How can I mention anyone? This is entirely your own conjecture. Chu Yu felt wronged. After Su gave Chu Yu a hand knife, it seemed that he was still feeling a little frustrated. He raised a bottle of beer and dried it in one mouthful, but Chu Yu was dumbfounded. Is really amazing. This woman. However, Chu Yu didn't continue to struggle with this problem. It was obvious that Su was not in a very good mood. By the way, what did you just say? The first issue of the Garden of Words, the number of votes in the top 3. Chu Yu once again captured the key points in Solu's words. Yes, or why do you think I invited you to eat meat and drink? Top 3? For this online voting, Chu Yu naturally knows that basically all comic companies in Longguo only look at one data and the number of votes they support when assessing the potential of a work. In the past, we used statistical mailing questionnaires to collect this data. Now it is more convenient and it is directly changed to online voting. This data is directly related to the status of a work in the comic journal, its publicity, the level of author's remuneration, and most importantly, whether the comic is eligible for continued serialization. If a work continues to be at the bottom of this vote, basically the comic company will make the decision to cut the work in half. As the Garden of Words published in the first episode, Chu Yu only wanted it to be in the top 10 in the number of votes in the 18 serial works on Ink Shadow, but he didn't expect the first episode to be directly in the top 3. Thinking of this, Chu Yu was also happy for a while, and learned the same as Su Lu before. He lifted a bottle of beer and drank a mouthful. 1/3 of the bottle. In the end it almost didn't squirt out. Cough cough cough. Seeing Chu Yu's head down and choked with beer, Su Lu finally couldn't help but laughed. At this time, she had 2 bottles of beer on her belly, and her cheeks were slightly ruddy. At this moment, the smile on her face was for a while to let the men in the shop notice this scene. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com includes Chu Yu, whose heartbeat has stopped for half a beat. Ah, it's comfortable, it's comfortable. Su Lu leaned back on the chair, and he felt a lot more relaxed than before. Since 3 months ago, Song Jiahu began to target her within the company's cartoonist resources went away and scattered, the gossip in the company, the sluggish performance of her own, and Song Jiahu's harassment brought her a lot of trouble and pressure. In the past 3 months, Su Lu has never eaten with others, nor has he laughed from the bottom of his heart as he does now. Today, it is not so much that she invited Chu Yu to dinner to celebrate the achievements of the court of Yanyi, but rather that she was looking for someone to accompany herself to talk, eat and eat. In terms of the effect, Su Lu felt very good. Chu Yu glanced at her. Is she like this every day? What a strange person. He shook his head, was hungry, and started to move formally, sweeping the barbecue in front of him. After half an hour, Chu Yu looked at Su Lu, who was crawling on the table, with a bewildered expression. Su Lu now has a flushed face, is completely drunk, and has no consciousness at all. As soon as the two came up, they ordered a basket of 18 bottles of beer. They also said that Chu Yu drank 2 bottles, the rest belonged to her. I thought she was a king, unexpectedly, she was just a bronze. After opening a dozen bottles of beer, she drank a little more than 4 bottles, ordered more than 20 plates of meat, and ended up eating 5 or 6 plates. That's it, why don't you leave without eating and drinking? Besides, didn't you say that today is your treat? Who did you fall down to check out? Am I fooled? Outside the barbecue restaurant. Hey, is it Kyushu's driver? Yes, I am. In the car. Brother, is that your girlfriend? Amazing. Brother, what do you think? I'm just a student, she's my sister. It was almost 1 o'clock in the morning, and Chu Yu struggled to move Solulian, who was drunk like a puddle of mud, to his home on the 2nd floor. Solu's car, Chu Yu, incidentally also asked the driver to park in the parking space downstairs. Although Chu Yu is the only one living in the house, fortunately, he cleans regularly and the guest rooms are basically clean and tidy. Took Su Lu onto the bed, took off his shoes and covered the quilt. Chu Yu was almost exhausted and collapsed. The drunk person was Shen. Su Lu on the bed, his cheeks are still very red, it seems that the alcohol hasn't faded at all. Originally, Su Lu put her away, her head tilted, and she slipped off the pillow. The sleeping situation is really bad. Chu Yu was a little speechless. Bent down and prepared to put her head on the pillow again, so that she would get up and stiff-neck tomorrow. As soon as his hand touched Solu's side face, Chu Yu only felt a black shadow quickly zoom in. Boom! There was a low voice in the room. Chu Yu fell backwards all over. Stay away from this lady, Song Jiahu, you big pervert, Dead eunuch, mentally distorted bastard, even if the men all over the world are dead, this lady won't be with you. Sue Yu on the bed suddenly sat up, waved his fists wildly at the air in front of him, closed his eyes and yelled. Chu Yu was completely stunned, only the pain in his face told him what had happened. Poor Chu Yu was kind enough to help her cushion her, but she didn't expect that when she sat up abruptly, she gave Chu Yu a head hammer, fisted with 8 fists in both hands. Chu Yu hit each of his nose and left cheek, and hit his right cheek. 2 punches. What kind of person is this? Chu Yu was beckoned in her nose, tears came out of her eyes. This sleeping situation is so bad, and the wine is so bad. Whoever marries her in the future is really for 8 lifetimes. Sue Yu on the bed yelled for half a minute, then suddenly leaned back heavily, fell down, breathing, became even. When she was operating blindly, the quilt was kicked out of the bed, the shoulder straps of her skirt slipped down to her arms, and she collapsed on the bed. Chu Yu didn't want to care about her anymore, but he was still worried that she would catch a cold. Resisted the pain on her face, closed her eyes, tried not to look at some pictures that shouldn't be seen, picked up the quilt, and finally carefully prevented the fist she might swing again, covered her with the quilt, and sighed. What kind of editors have I encountered? Don't ordinary comic editors try their best to help comic artists solve problems? How to get here? I have to drink with her, eat with her, and be beaten by her. Sue Yu slept soundly, but the 3-point drunkenness in Chu Yu's mind was awakened by Sue Yu. There was a pain in his face, and he didn't know when he would fall asleep. Shook his head, Chu Yu turned off the lights and left the room. Early morning the next day. The clouds were so dense that there seemed to be a hole in the sky, and the pouring rain kept on. The sound of thunder and rain is endless. Sue Yu frowned, and his consciousness gradually recovered. It hurts, my head. It hurts. Here, where is it? Sue Yu was already in his heart, and he looked around quickly to see if the clothes on his body were intact. It's okay. Sue Yu took a long breath of relief. There is a pair of slippers beside the bed. There is a faint smell of food in the air. Goo goo goo. The belly is protesting to her. Sue Yu got out of bed and opened the door. In the living room, Chu Yu is busy making breakfast. 2 bowls of noodles, with some fried pork, cabbage, bean sprouts, plus a fried egg, a cup of warm milk. Awesome, boy. Sue Yu now also remembered the matter of eating and drinking with Chu Yu last night. In that case, it goes without saying that this is Chu Yu's home. She was not shy about being taken care of by Chu Yu after she was drunk. She came to the table in a few steps and picked up a bowl of noodles. Began to eat. This woman is really unconscious. Sue Yu seemed to be really hungry, so he ate noodles and said nothing. After eating a bowl of noodles, I dry a whole cup of warm milk in one bite. Is like a starving ghost reborn. Chu Yu looked at him with a speechless expression. But I have to say, the same way of eating, if you change to an average girl, you may feel a little inelegant. But these actions seem a little cute on Sue Yu, maybe this is the effect of the high-value bonus. After Sue Yu finished eating, he looked at Chu Yu with admiration and scanned the surroundings by the way. Not bad, boy, the house is cleaned and clean, and the cooking is so good. Wouldn't anyone marry you in the future? Chu Yu spouted milk and looked at Sue Yu. Are you driving? When Sue Yu spoke, he also felt something wrong, his cheeks were a little red, but he didn't continue to talk too much on this topic. Sue Yu looked at his mobile phone, and it was already 9:20 in the morning. Wow, is this time already? Chu Yu, don't you have to go to class? Chu Yu looked at Sue Yu and said in an angry tone. You are drunk in my house, I don't want to leave you alone, I will skip class today. It's you, why don't you rush? Although it is past 9 o'clock, it is better for you to be late than skip work. Sue Yu didn't care much. You can skip class, why can't I skip work? At that time, just write a report about going out to discuss the plot of the comic with the manga artist and submit it. If you want to come, I won't be deducted from my salary. But speaking of it, although the two of us have chatted on Wixen many times before, but the formal meeting is the first time you came to our company and yesterday. My impression is correct, you skipped class twice. Your father. When Suelu said this, her gazing eyes finally noticed the photo of the young couple in the living room of Chu Yu's house, and the words stopped abruptly. The atmosphere is a bit embarrassing. Suelu is quick thinking and forcibly reverses the subject. No wonder you can create works like the Garden of Words. What do you mean? Chu Yu looked puzzled. You think? The protagonist in the Garden of Words is a high school student who loves to skip classes on rainy days and has a dream of becoming a shoemaker. What about you, also a high school student, loves skipping classes, and has a dream of being a cartoonist? Actually, the prototype of the protagonist in the Garden of Leaves is you. Hey! Chu Yu's mouth opened wide. Hello, this is an overinterpretation, so let's force it. I obviously just copied the original work of the system. How do you see so many things? How about it? I'm speechless. Suelu was smug. Since the archetype of Chu Yu, the protagonist of the Garden of Words, is yourself as the author, it also means that what happened to Chu Yu in the comics must be what you want to happen to yourself. I didn't expect it. Younger, you are such a person. Suelu teased, looking at Chu Yu. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. Do you see who I am again? Chu Yu felt a little funny. You think, the heroine that the hero likes is Yukino, right? In the comics, she is a few years older than the hero. Didn't you say it before? What actually happened to the hero is actually what you want to happen to you. From this we can see that you are actually a sister-in-law. Cough cough cough. Chuyu almost didn't breathe. What is this and what? Your brain is too big. Suelu continued. After all, the embarrassment of the boy on the opposite side made her feel funny and anxious, and couldn't help but want to tease him. I think about it, since Yukino is the heroine, that means you have all your fantasies about your favorite women in Yukino. And your key scenes throughout the work are rain. The confession of the male lead Chu Yu and the female lead Swai was also on a rainy day. It means that a rainy day is an excellent background for you to confess. The boy who skipped class on rainy days. I met a beautiful woman who was frustrated in the workplace who skipped work on a rainy day. Emotions arise after the two meet. The more I said, the more Suelu felt something was wrong, but he just couldn't figure out what was wrong. Until she noticed the strange look in Chu Yu's opposite, and the patter of rain and thunder outside the house. She reacted. The boy who skipped class on rainy days. Beautiful women who are frustrated in the workplace on rainy days. Rainy weather. The more I said, the more I looked like her and Chu Yu. Suelu stood up all of a sudden, took 2 steps back with his chest. Chu Yu is almost stunned. This Suelu is really a chat ghost. Also, are you serious about taking 2 steps back? Do you really think that I am the kind of person you imagine, and still have ideas for you? Ah, haha. Suelu seemed to think that his subconscious actions were too exaggerated. Chu Yu, I was joking just now, forgot what I said. Suelu sat down again, her expression has returned to calm, but it is not known whether her heart is calm or not. It's just that the previous topic was directed by her in some strange directions, and the awkward atmosphere could not be relieved temporarily. By the way, this is your car key. I found a driver who drove the two of us back last night, and the key was returned to you first. Chu Yu couldn't find anything to say for a while. Is my car down? Solu's eyes lit up when he heard the words. Well, that's right. Chu Yu nodded. What? Are you going to drive to work? That's strange. Suelu looked around. Lend me your umbrella for use. Picking up an umbrella from the cabinet, Sue Lu picked up the car key and rushed downstairs. 3 minutes later, although he was holding an umbrella, Sue Lu came back with a bag in his arms. Chu Yu looked at her strangely. What's the situation? Lend your bathroom for use. Sue Lu didn't explain much to Chu Yu. Held the bag and walked to the bathroom. After a while, there was a splash of water in the bathroom. Seeing this situation, she should be taking a bath inside. This woman, you are really welcome. Chu Yu shook his head, which happened to be boring. Grabbed the tea, put it in the teapot, poured water, and fired. While boiling water, by the way, wash the tableware after breakfast for the two of you. After Sue Lu came out of the bath, Chu Yu was already sitting on the table slowly drinking tea. You can really enjoy it. At this moment, Sue Lu has changed his outfit. The emerald skirt was replaced, the upper body was a pure white shirt, and the lower body was a black knee-length skirt. Went to eat barbecue last night, and his body was full of the smell of fireworks and wine. Sue Lu couldn't stand it for a long time. Chu Yu said that her car was parked downstairs. She just took the change of clothes she had in the car and took a shower by the way. Sue Lu poured himself a cup of tea, took a sip, and exclaimed, "Good tea." Suddenly, she seemed to realize something and stared at the teacup in her hand. For a long time, she said, "Are you really amazing, boy? If you like this tea, you can drink it at Yonghui supermarket downstairs, 25 a bag, 1 caddy, enough to drink for half a year." Chu Yu said without changing his face. "But you say magic, what is magic in me? You can really chat. Is my focus on tea?" Sue Lu gave him a glance. It took a long time to speak. "We only met for a few weeks." "Yet?" Chu Yu nodded. "But I just suddenly realized that although we have only known each other for a few weeks, when I get along with you, I feel a lot less pressure inexplicably. At least, in front of many friends I have known for a few years, I will not speak as freely as I am now, nor will I be so embarrassed to eat and drink tea at other people's homes, and even borrow the bathroom by the way. That's why I said you are magical." Sue Lu looked at Chu Yu, she herself was a little confused. Sue Lu thought for a while and thought. Could it be that you are the kind of person who is rumored to allow women to easily relax their vigilance and believe in him, use and deceive women's innocent feelings, and have the potential for scumbags? Are you cursing me around the corner? Chu Yu didn't know how to answer Solu's words for a while, and simply didn't want to talk to her. The two were speechless for a while. Outside the window, the rain stopped. Sue Lu was full and drunk, brought up his change of clothes, and left Chu Yu's home. A few minutes later, Chu Yu's cell phone rang. On Wixon, Solu's transfer message popped up. Yesterday's meal and driving expenses. Unknowingly, it's the 5th episode of The Garden of Words on Ink Shadow. Compared with the third-ranked readers of the first episode, the second episode of Yes Hiding's vote came to the second place of Ink Shadow. In the third episode, the voting order of The Garden of Words came to the first place. And the fourth and fifth episodes are all ranked first in the vote. Moreover, the number of votes for the fifth episode of The Garden of Words was more than twice as many as more than 2,400 votes, leading the second place with more than 1,100 votes. In terms of the number of readers' votes, the number of votes for The Garden of Words is even more than that of a few serialized works on the comics. But how can Ink Shadow and Man Shadow be compared, an audience of tens of thousands, and an audience of hundreds of thousands? In addition, the sales of these few Ink Shadows have increased by about 10% after only replacing the new work of The Garden of Words. Everyone with a clear eye understands which work is the credit of this. Gradually, in Cuttlefish Comics, the name of Shui Xin, the author of The Garden of Words, has been mentioned more and more by many editors. Some cartoonists who have published works in other periodicals have also gradually learned about it. In the Ink Film periodicals, there has been a powerful newcomer cartoonist. Although there are dozens of journals under the Cuttlefish Comics Club, there are more than a dozen serials of comics, and there are a large number of authors under it. But in any case, someone who can vote for the number of summits in a certain periodical, and still steadily occupies an advantage, such a guy is definitely capable. Is not only a comic club. The name Shui Xin has gradually spread among the students of various universities. After all, the biggest audience of comics is students. Among them, middle school and high school students are the most, because they already have basic logical recognition ability, and they have enough money to buy comics and periodicals. Even in Chuiyu's class, there are many people discussing this work. Lu Ji, don't you like to buy ink shadows to watch? I have read the recent comics and comics on Fire Dragon and Tianyan comics. I'm boring to death. Or else you can borrow the ink shadows you bought. Let me see. I don't care. The girl named Lu Ji looks ordinary and has average grades. In the class, like Chuiyu, she is an invisible figure. After she finished speaking, she took out many comic magazines from the desk box. The last few issues of Ink Shadows are all here, you can take them if you want to see them. So many works, which one is good? The man borrowing the comics also asked in passing. As far as my hobby is concerned, I think the manga called Yan Ye Ji Ting is the best. Let me see, yes, if you want to see this work, start with the 396th issue of Ink Shadow. This issue is the first issue published in the Garden of Words. He does not mean that. Chuiyu, who was sitting in the back row of the school, heard the words and glanced at the two classmates. He was naturally happy that someone in the class was discussing his work, but he didn't want to let the class know that he was drawing comics. After all, that will only cause trouble. His original intention of drawing comics was that he just wanted to see more comic works in different dimensions, and it would be best if he could make some money by the way. Compared to becoming a star cartoonist, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com came across big fans while walking on the road. He was more enthusiastic about obscurity. He stayed in his home on a herd of acres of land, unattended, and quietly painted cartoons. Therefore, his attention was only cast on the two classmates for 3 seconds, before moving back, and continuing to sleep on the table. But Qin Qunyu, who was sitting in the front row, always felt very familiar after hearing the words Garden of Words mentioned by Lu Ji in the back seat. As a schoolmaster, she naturally has a good memory. In just a minute, she recalled why she was familiar with the 4 words the Garden of Words. Isn't that the name of the comic that I found in Chuyu's desk box more than a month ago when I asked for information on Chuiyu? I read a little bit of the content by myself, and then Chuiyu gave it a few words. Such a thing, Qin Qunyu can be said to recall it vividly. Excuse me. When Lu Ji talked happily with the classmate who borrowed the comics, Qin Qunyu turned around and interrupted them. I want to ask, can I borrow the 396 issue of Ink Shadow? Of course you can. Lu Ji was stunned and said boldly. Qin Qunyu picked up the manga periodical, followed the catalogue, and found the page of the Garden of Words. Opened it. When enters the eye, it is a familiar picture, the pavilion in the rain, the boy and the woman in the pavilion. A short poem familiar from comics. Qin Qunyu turned his head and looked at Chuiyu, who had spoken to her with no more than 10 sentences in the first 2 months of school. At this time, he was taking a serious sleep after class. As expected, it's that work. How come? Could it be that Chuiyu posted that work on Ink Shadow, and it was successfully published? The plane of the Dragon Kingdom is different from the plane of the Earth. On the plane of the Earth, adults basically look at comics with an attitude that only children can read. But the plane of the Dragon Kingdom is different. There are some differences between ancient history and the plane of the Earth. Moreover, 120 years ago, the founding head of the country was born, and the rule of the feudal regime was overthrown in just 20 years, and the head of state he also had inexplicable resentment towards the weak RB Island at that time. After the founding of the country, it attacked RB Island for no reason. After it was taken down, it was divided into a province on its own territory. Is also because of this. On RB Island, after the birth of comics in the last century, the popularity of comics quickly swept the entire Dragon Country because there were no borders. Inside Long Country, famous cartoonists are as well known as popular stars, and their earning power is even worse. In the plane of the Dragon Kingdom, a classmate in my class becomes a cartoonist. The feeling that my classmates bring to classmates is basically the same as that of an actor who has participated in TV series and movies in my class. And Chin Kyunyu, although she is the squad leader of this class on weekdays, and a well-rounded academic master, in private, she is actually very keen on reading comics in her free time, which can be regarded as a senior comic fan. Otherwise, after seeing the manuscript of the Court of Yanya in Chu Yu's desk box last time, he would not subconsciously read it. Garden of Words. Chin Kyunyu looked at Chu Yu, but his expression remained calm. Lu Ji, can you lend me these comics after Xueqing finishes reading them? Chin Kyunyu looked at Lu Ji and said. Squad leader, if you want to see you, just borrow it first, I'm not in a hurry. Xueqing said with a smile. While Chu Yu fell asleep, Chin Kyunyu's curiosity was attracted by Chu Yu's identity as a cartoonist. The monitor of the 3rd and 5th class of high school was taken to the infirmary by Chu Yu due to low blood sugar during the flag-raising ceremony. The student Zhao Kainyin, who had the highest grades in 3 years of high school, stared nervously at his mobile phone. To be precise, it has been repeatedly confirming whether a friend has sent a message on the mobile phone's way signal. In the morning, the Cuttlefish Manga Club regularly held a serialization meeting. Chief Editor Pang Feng and Deputy Chief Editor Song Jieu are sitting at the head, and extending on both sides are a group of comic editors from Cuttlefish Comics, including Sue Lu. In the morning, the entire serialization meeting was called a lip service, and there were only a few excellent journals in the entire comics club. Every editor hoped that the comics he was responsible for could be serialized in a good journal. This is not only related to the manga artists' work. Their future is also related to their income, reputation, status in the industry. As long as there are people, there is struggle, regardless of all walks of life. But whether it can be as desired is not only related to the quality of the work, but also to the internal weight or relationship of the editorial comics. After discussion, I will now announce the results of the meeting. The editor-in-chief Pang Feng is about 40 years old, with a serious face in Chinese character. Next is a series of serial proposals for works, either approved or rejected. On the seat, a famous editor looked nervous. Along with Pang Feng's sentence, the editors below are either happy or frustrated. At last, So Lu's proposal for the serialization of Black Magician on Tianqi shall be rejected. Sue Lu heard the words and squeezed his hands slightly. Sue Lu had expected this result a long time ago. She sighed and was already considering how to comfort that person. At the front of the table, Song Jiao looked at Sue Lu with a smile on his face. Sue Lu suddenly became angry. For 3 full months, Song Jiao would hold negative opinions as long as it was about the serialization plan proposed by Sue Lu. Some of the previous works, even including this Black Magician, do not have the objection of Song Jiao, the deputy editor-in-chief. It is very likely that there will be serialization opportunities. That's right. After announcing the meeting's decision, Pang Feng looked at everyone. Inform a message that after discussion due to the poor popularity of Shadow Swordsman, the serialization will be ended within 3 weeks. In this case, there will be a serialization vacancy in the comic. Those who are interested can go down and make preparations early. Pang Feng's words made the breath of many editors underneath become short. Everyone knows that although the Cuttlefish Comics Club has many periodicals, there is only one real platform journal, which is Man Ying. The sales channels are all over the province, and the weekly sales volume is over 350,000. In this journal, every vacancy created will cause their editors and their cartoonists to compete. It's been 2 months since the last quota was created, and finally waited until there was another vacancy on it. When it was approaching noon, there was a faint vibration from Zhao Kainyan's mobile phone. Is the vibration of the message sent by Wixon. Although Get Out of Class has not finished yet, Zhao Kainyan still secretly took out his cell phone. This is not the first time I have experienced such a scene, but Zhao Kainyan still feels a little nervous, and his heartbeat speeds up. Sorry, the Black Magician's serial proposal was decided by the meeting and rejected. Although there is no expression on his face, there is deep disappointment in Zhao Kainyan's eyes. As expected. Did it fail again? Is there no talent? The phone vibrates again. There is a message sent. At night, Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com has time. How about coming out for a meal together? After hesitating, Zhao Kainyan responded. Yes. I am sorry. Before starting dinner, Sue Lu took a deep breath and apologized heavily to the girl in front of him. Sister Sue, why do you want to apologize? Zhao Kainyan looked blank. Sue Lu hesitated for a moment, and finally confessed to the girl in front of him about his current situation in the comics club. Zhao Kainyan listened carefully, his expression from bewilderment at the beginning, dignity later, and peace at the end. So Sister Sue, you apologize to me. Because you think my work was not serialized, because it was proposed by you for serialization, which resulted in malicious targeting by your deputy editor, and ultimately led to the rejection of the serialization proposal. That's right. Sue Lu nodded heavily. To be honest, during this period of time, she has always felt very sorry for the cartoonists under her, so she can fully understand the authors who originally had a good relationship with her but eventually switched to other editors. Zhao Kainyan was silent for a moment, and finally she sighed. Sister Sue, you don't have to blame yourself in these aspects. Sue Lu looked at her. Thank you for confessing this with me. But speaking of it, the reason why the serialization failed to pass is just my own lack of strength. Zhao Qin said. If my message is not wrong, you are responsible for the work of the Garden of Words that has recently reached the top of the ink film, right? Sue Lu glanced at her, wondering why she mentioned the Garden of Yan yet.